Welcome to Sports Live Media on YouTube. It's you guys, Sports Live, broadcasting live today, November 24th, 2025. Today, we're going to do two aspects of things, maybe three. This is college football's Week 14 and NFL Week 13 games. My perspective, the games will be taking place between November 24th and November 30th of 2025. We're going to stick with the format we've been doing the last couple of weeks, and hopefully next week we'll resume back to the original format of this, but we're just going to go through. I'm going to mention who's playing. I'm going to go over the margin of victory or the point spread that the pros say it's going to be. I'll mention the over-under, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it and stuff. And there will be some analysis. It just won't be as in-depth as what you're used to, but we're going to do it this way so we can focus on more football teams. We're going to start with college football. We'll do that. Then we will do the same thing for NFL, and after that, I have a special treat regarding college football, but we'll get into that when we get to that point. Anyway, for the football games, you have two football games that will take place in college football on November 25th, 2025. You have Bowling Green versus Massachusetts. In that game, Bowling Green is favored by the pros to win by 15.5 or 16. The over-under is 45.5 or 46. My thoughts are Bowling Green does win the game, and I do agree with the pros on that, but I disagree on the margin. I think it'll be a 9-point margin, and I'm going over the 46. The other game on November 25th is Western Michigan versus Eastern Michigan. The pros favor Western Michigan to win over Eastern Michigan by 5.5 or 6 points. The over-under is 45.5 or 46. In this game, I actually do agree with the pros on this one. I think it will be a 6-point game that Western Michigan defeats Eastern Michigan, and I'm going to go over the 46. You have one game on November 27th. That game is, let's see, that game is Navy versus Memphis. And in that game of Navy versus Memphis, you have, you have Memphis. Yeah, you have Memphis favored to win that game by 5.5 or 6 points. The over-under is 58.5 or 59. I'm going to agree with the pros on this one. Memphis wins by 6, and I'm going to go under the 59. You have several games on November 28th, which is going to be the day after Thanksgiving. You have Ole Miss versus Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, and in that game, Ole Miss is favored to win over Mississippi State by 7.5 or 8 points. The over-under is 63.5 or 64. I agree with the pros on this one. I think Ole Miss beats Mississippi State by 8, and I'm going over the 64. Next, you'll have Utah versus Kansas. In this game, the pros favor Utah to beat Kansas by 13.5 or 14. The over-under is 59.5 or 60. I actually disagree with the pros. I do agree with the pros, Utah winning, but I disagree with the margin. I believe the margin will be 8 points, and I'm going under the 60. And hello to you, Yamato. I appreciate you joining me today. Let's see. Like I said, Utah will win by 8, and I'm going under the 60. Next, you have Iowa versus Nebraska. And in that game, you have Iowa favored to win by 5.5 or 6 points. The over-under is 38.5 or 39. I agree with the pros on this one. Iowa wins by 6 over Nebraska, and I'm going over the 39. Next, you have the University of Ohio versus Buffalo. In that game, the pros favored the University of Ohio to defeat Buffalo by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 47.5 or 48, and I agree with the pros on this one. The University of Ohio defeats Buffalo by 7, and I'm going to go over the 48. Next, you have Kent State versus Northern Illinois. In this game, Northern Illinois is favored to defeat Kent State by 4.5 or 5 points. The over-under is 44.5 or 45. I'm going to agree with the pros on this one. 5-point win over Kent State from Northern Illinois, and I'm going over the 45. Thank you for joining me, Klimpa. I appreciate that. Let's see. Next game we have, Air Force versus Colorado State. In that game, they favor Air Force to defeat Colorado State by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 47.5. And hello to you, Cannon. Hello, Eon. Hello. How are y'all doing today? Anyway, we have Air Force favored to win by 2.5 or 3 points over Colorado State. The over-under is 47.5 or 48. And I'm going to agree with the pros on that one, and I'm going under the 48. I don't think this game's going to have a lot of points being scored. Next game we have is Georgia versus Georgia Tech. In this game, the pros favor Georgia to defeat Georgia Tech by 13.5 or 14 points. The over-under is 59.5 or 60. I do agree with the pros on having Georgia to defeat Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech, despite the fact they've had some recent struggles, are playing better than what we've seen them in recent years. And I think it's going to be a struggle game regardless of how it plays out. So because of that, I have Georgia winning the game by 7, not the 14, and I'm going under the 60. Next game that will take place on November 28th is San Diego State versus New Mexico. In this game, San Diego State is favored to win by 1.5 or 2 points, which is really almost too close to call. And the over-under is 41.5 or 42. And in this game, I'm actually going to agree on this one. San Diego State defeats New Mexico by 2, and I'm going over the 42. Next, you have Temple versus North Texas. In this game, North Texas is favored to win over Temple by 19.5 or 20 points over Temple. The over-under is 64.5 or 65. I agree that North Texas will win the game, but I disagree on the margin. I think North Texas will win the game by 14 points, and I'm going under the 65. Next, you have, hello to you, Marcus. I appreciate you. Next game we have is Boise State versus Utah State. In this game, Boise State is favored by the pros to win the game over Utah State by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 55.5 or 56. In that game, I actually agree with the pros. I believe Boise State will defeat Utah State by 4, and I'm going under the 56. Next, you have Indiana versus Purdue. Indiana is favored by the pros in this game to win by 28.5 or 29 points. Yes, I know that seems like a lot. Indiana is playing lights out, and Purdue is really not that good at all this year. So, under normal circumstances, I would disagree with that big of a margin. But because of how Indiana has been playing recently, I'm going to agree with the pros on this one. Indiana defeats Purdue by 29. The over-under is 53.5 or 54. And again, I'm going to agree with the pros completely on this game. Indiana wins by 29, and I'm going under the 54. Next game we have is Texas A&M versus Texas. In this game, Texas A&M is favored to defeat Texas by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. And I do think it's going to be a very close game, and I think it's really going to come to who has the ball at the very end of the game. And so with that, I do agree with the pros on this one. I have Texas A&M winning by 3 points over Texas, and I'm going over the 52. Yeah, and that one was a really hard one for me to call. So next game we have is Arizona versus Arizona State. In that game, the pros favor Arizona to defeat Arizona State by 1.5 or 2 points, which is generally too close to call. The over-under is 49.5 or 50. I'm going to disagree completely with having Arizona defeating Arizona State. Arizona State has shown times this year where they've had promise. They've been ranked in the top 25 a couple of times. They're not this week. But I'm going to disagree completely with the pros on this one. And I'm going Arizona State defeats Arizona by 3, and I'm going over the 50. All right, that's the last of the games that will be taking place on November 28th. All the remaining games will be taking place on November 29th of 2025. First game we'll look at on the 29th is Ohio State versus Michigan. And in this game, the pros have Ohio State favored to defeat Michigan by 9.5 or 10 points. The over-under is 44.5 or 45. And I actually agree with the pros on that. And so Ohio State is actually pretty good this year, but Michigan will do everything they can to prevent Ohio State from winning, and it will be close. And normally on that one, I think the margin would be more than what it is, but I think they got it right. So in this game, I agree with the pros. Ohio State defeats Michigan by 10. I'm going over the 45. Next, you have Texas Tech versus Virginia. Or versus West Virginia, I'm sorry. In this game, Texas Tech is favored to win by 20.5 or 21 points over West Virginia. The over-under is 52.5 or 53. And I'm going to agree with the pros. Texas Tech actually is pretty good. West Virginia, they're not so great. But so I'm going to agree with that against my better judgment. Texas Tech defeats West Virginia by 21 points. And I'm going over the 53. Next game we have is Miami and Florida versus Pittsburgh. In this game, Miami is favored to defeat Pittsburgh by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. Again, normally in this game, I think the margin would be bigger than what it is, but Pittsburgh has been surprising people. They've been winning games they really shouldn't, and they're losing. It's like they're winning games they shouldn't, and they're losing games they shouldn't. And it's kind of hard to tell on that. And I think Miami and Florida is going to have a defensive battle with that. So under those circumstances, I will agree with the pros on this one. Miami and Florida defeats Pittsburgh by 7 points, and I'm going over the 52. I believe both teams will score points and do it quickly, especially within the first half. Next game is Houston versus Baylor. In this game, Baylor is favored to defeat Houston by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 60.5 or 61. And that game is going to be a close game as well. And in that game, I'm going to agree with the pros. Baylor defeats Houston by 3. And I'm going to go over the 61. Both teams are known for scoring a lot of points. Next game we have is Kentucky versus Louisville. In this game, Louisville is favored to defeat Kentucky by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 47.5 or 48. And I think that game will also be a close game. So because of that, I'm going to agree with the pros on that one and have Louisville defeat Kentucky by 4, and I'm going over the 48. Next, you have Clemson versus South Carolina. And in that, the pros favor South Carolina to defeat Clemson by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 46.5 or 47. And in that game, I'm going to completely disagree with the pros. I think Clemson needs to win, and they're going to win over South Carolina this week. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, but I'm going to stand by my picks. Clemson beats South Carolina by 2. And I'm going to go over the 47. Next, you have Colorado versus Kansas State. In this game, Kansas State is favored to defeat Colorado by 17.5 or 18 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. And in that game, I'm going to agree with the pros. Kansas State will defeat Colorado by 18. And I'm going to go over the 52. Colorado is not playing up to their expectations on what was expected of them this year. They're losing games they really shouldn't be, and they do not have the talent like they used to have. So I think Colorado is going to lose big time to Kansas State. Next, we have Iowa State versus Oklahoma State. In this game, the pros favor Iowa State to defeat Oklahoma State by 14.5 or 15 points. The over-under is 49.5 or 50. And normally I wouldn't agree with the pros on this one with Iowa State winning by this big of a margin, but this year I'm going to do so. Oklahoma State started off the season on a very sour note. They lost games they really shouldn't. Then they fired their coach that had been coaching for 21 years. And so, yeah, Oklahoma State's just not where it needs to be when it comes to that. So, Iowa State's going to defeat Oklahoma State by 15, and I'm going to go over the 50. Next game we have is East Carolina versus Florida Atlantic. In this game, Eastern Carolina is favored to defeat Florida Atlantic by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 66.5 or 67, and in this game, I'm actually going to agree with the pros on this game. I believe Eastern Carolina will defeat Florida Atlantic by 7, and I'm going under the 67. Next game we have is Toledo versus Central Michigan. In this game, the pros favor Toledo to defeat Central Michigan by 10.5 or 11 points. The over-under is 44.5 or 45. And I'm actually going to agree. I think Toledo started off the season, not doing well on things, but they've gotten a little better as the season has gone on. So on this game, Toledo defeats Central Michigan by 11, and I'm going over the 45. Next, you have Ball State versus Miami and Ohio. In this game, they favor Miami and Ohio to win by 17.5 or 18 points over Ball State. The over-under is 41.5 or 42. So my thoughts on this game, I think Miami and Ohio does win the game, but I disagree on the margin of victory. So my thought is Miami and Ohio will defeat Ball State by 10, not 18, and it will be over the 42. Next game we have is UCF versus BYU. In this game, BYU is favored to defeat UCF by 18.5 or 19 points. The over-under is 47.5 or 48. BYU is so much better than UCF. It really shows on the field. They had some hiccups early in the season, but they've somehow gotten past that and are doing really well. And with that, I have BYU. I agree with the pros on that one. BYU will defeat UCF by 19, and I'm going to go I'm going under the 48. Next, you have UTEP versus Delaware. In this game, Delaware is favored to defeat UTEP by 5.5 or 6 points. The over-under is 54.5 or 55. And in that game, I'm going to agree with the pros on that one. I think Delaware is going to defeat UTEP by 6, and I'm going to go over the 55. Next, you have Florida International versus Sam Houston. And in that game, Florida International is favored to win over Sam Houston by 10.5 or 11 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. I do agree with the pros having Florida International winning that game, but I disagree on the margin. I think Florida International will defeat Sam Houston by 6, and I'm going to go over the 52. Next, you have Georgia Southern versus Marshall. In this game, Marshall is favored to defeat Georgia Southern by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 60.5 or 61. And I think both teams are good on special teams and on defense. And because of that, I agree with the pros on this game. Marshall defeats Georgia Southern by 7, and I'm going under the 61. Next, you have Western Kentucky versus Jacksonville State. There's a lot riding on this game because whoever wins this game will most likely be going to the Conference USA Championship. And I'm not sure who their opponent would be. In this game, the pros favor Western Kentucky to defeat Jacksonville State by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 55.5 or 56. And in this situation, I'm actually going to agree with the pros on this one. I actually think Jacksonville State University is going to lose to Western Kentucky by 3, and I'm going to go under the 56. Next game we're looking at is Louisiana Tech versus Missouri State. Missouri State is favored by the pros to win this game by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. I agree with the pros on this one. Missouri State defeats Louisiana Tech by 4, and I'm going over the 52. Next, you have Georgia State versus Old Dominion. In this game, the pros favor Old Dominion to defeat Georgia State by 26.5 or 27 points. The over-under is 58.5 or 59. Well, I agree with the pros in having Old Dominion winning the game, but I disagree on the margin of victory. I think Old Dominion will defeat Georgia State by 12, and I'm going under the 59. And hola to you, Gemma. I appreciate it. And anyone else who's come in that I failed to mention, thank you for coming in today. It's greatly appreciated. Yeah. So, next game we're going to look at is Arkansas State versus Appalachian State, commonly called App State. In that game, the pros favor Appalachian State to defeat Arkansas State by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 55.5 or 56. In that game, I'm going to agree with the pros. Appalachian State defeats Arkansas State by 3. I'm going to go under the 56. Next, you have Boston College versus Syracuse. In this game, Boston College is favored to defeat Syracuse by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 53.5 or 54. I'm actually going to agree on this, and I don't mean to say this, but I'm just going to go out and say it. Both of these teams, in terms of, how well they're playing or how bad they're playing, if I were to rate them on a scale of 0 to 10, they would be probably about a 1 for both sides. Both teams kind of suck, and I don't mean to be that harsh, but yeah, when you got two teams that suck that play each other, it's going to end up being a closer game than most realize. I think there's going to be a lot of turnovers, and it's going to be one of those games that's really going to be hard to watch. Despite that, I do agree with the pros on this one. Boston College defeats Syracuse by 4, and I'm going over the 54. Next game is Middle Tennessee versus New Mexico State. In this game, New Mexico State is favored by the pros to win by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 54.5 or 55. I do agree with that. I do agree with the pros on that one. New Mexico State defeats Middle Tennessee by 4. I'm going over the 55. Next, you have the UL Monroe versus Louisiana. In this game, UL Monroe is favored to defeat Louisiana by 17.5 or 18 points. The over-under is 48.5 or 49. And in that circumstance, I'm going to actually agree with the pros on this one. UL Monroe defeats Louisiana by 18 points, and I'm going under the 19. Next game you have is South Alabama versus Texas State. Texas State is favored by the pros to win over South Alabama by 9.5 or 10 points. The over-under is 63.5 or 64. Texas State is, I'm actually going to agree with that one. I think Texas State wins the game, but I disagree on the actual margin of victory. I think Texas State defeats South Alabama by 6, and I'm going to go under the 64. Next, you have UAB versus Tulsa. In this game, the pros favor Tulsa to defeat UAB by 7.5 or 8 points. The over-under is 60.5 or 61, and I'm going to agree with the pros on that one. Tulsa defeats UAB by 8, and I'm going over the 61. Next, you have Oregon versus Washington. And that's really a hard game because both teams can play really good defense when they want to. Note the emphasis on when I say when they want to. In this game, the pros favor Oregon to defeat Washington by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 53.5 or 54. And so because of what I mentioned about the defenses from both sides, I'm actually going to agree with the pros on this one. Oregon defeats Washington by 7, and I'm going over the 54. Next game we have is LSU versus Oklahoma. In this game, Oklahoma is favored to defeat LSU by 10.5 or 11 points. The over-under is 38.5 or 39, which I think is a little too low to start with. So I'm going to agree with the pros on this one. Oklahoma is a better team than LSU. Oklahoma defeats LSU by 11, and I'm definitely going over the 39. I think that's really too far under what it's going to be. You know what it's going to be. I think it's going to be way more than that. So over on the 39, and I'm saying over with an asterisk, meaning that I think that was just considerably too low as a starting point. And I will say that, and I don't mind. Next is Vanderbilt versus Tennessee. In this game, the pros favor Tennessee to defeat Vanderbilt by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 64.5 or 65. And in this situation, Vanderbilt is playing some of the best football they have in years. I'm going to completely disagree with the pros on this one, and it might come back to bite me, but that's okay. But I have Vanderbilt winning over Tennessee by 2, and I'm going to go over the 65. Next game you have is Missouri versus Arkansas. In this game, Missouri is favored to defeat Arkansas by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 58.5 or 59. I'm actually going to agree with the pros on this one. I think Missouri is also playing better than they've played in a while. So they're going to defeat Arkansas by 3 points, and I'm going under the 59. Next, you have Wisconsin versus Minnesota. In this game, the pros favor Minnesota to defeat Wisconsin by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 38.5 or 39. That game, I think, will be a much closer game, and the 39 as a point for the over-under is more realistic. So I'm going to agree with the pros. Minnesota defeats Wisconsin by 3, and I'm going over the 39. Next, you have Penn State versus Rutgers. In this game, Penn State is favored to defeat Rutgers by 11.5 or 12 points. The over-under is 55.5 or 56. And I'm actually going to agree with the pros on this one. Penn State lost their head football coach after losing certain games. Rutgers can play good sometimes, and I think because of that sometimes, that's why the margin's not bigger than what it is. Because any other year, I'd say that margin was actually a little too low. But I'm going to go ahead and agree with the pros on this one. Penn State defeats Rutgers by 12, and I'm going under the 56. Next, you have Wake Forest versus Duke. In this game, the pros favor Duke to defeat Wake Forest by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 54.5 or 55. And so that game, I think, will be a close game too. So I'm going to agree with the pros on that one. Duke wins the game by 3 over Wake Forest. I'm going over the 55. Next game we have is Cincinnati versus TCU. In that game, TCU is favored to defeat Cincinnati by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 58.5 or 59. And I'm going to agree with the pros on this one. I think that one's going to be a close game as well. I believe TCU will defeat Cincinnati by 4, and I'm going under the 59. Next, you have Kennesaw State versus Liberty. And in that game, the pros favor Kennesaw State to defeat Liberty by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 54.5 or 55. And I'm actually going to agree with that one. I think that one's going to be a close game, or it should be anyway. I believe Kennesaw State will defeat Liberty by 3, and I'm going under the 55. Next, you have Troy versus Southern Miss. And in that game, you have Southern Miss favored to defeat Troy by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 50.5 or 51. And in that game, I'm actually going to disagree with the pros on that one. I think Troy will defeat Southern Miss by 3, and I'm going over the 51. Next, you have Army versus UTSA. In that game, UTSA, or the University of Texas in San Antonio, is favored to defeat Army by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. And I'm going to actually agree with that. I think UTSA is the better team between the two, and they'll defeat Army by 7. I'm going to go over the 52. Next, you have James Madison versus Coastal Carolina. You have James Madison favored to win that game by 21.5 or 22. The over-under is 53.5 or 54. I agree that James Madison will win the game, but I disagree on the margin of victory. I think James Madison will win by 12 over Coastal Carolina, and I'm going under the 54. Next game you have is UCLA versus USC. In this game, USC is favored to defeat UCLA by 20.5 or 21 points. The over-under is 59.5 or 60. I do agree with the pros on this one. USC will defeat UCLA by 21 points, and I'm going over the 60. Next, you have Florida State versus Florida. And in that game, Florida is favored to win over Florida State by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. I think it'll be a close game, so I agree with the pros on that one. I think Florida will defeat Florida State by 3, and I'm going to go over the 52. Next, you have Oregon State versus Washington State. In that game, you have Washington State favored to defeat Oregon State by 13.5 or 14. The over-under is 42.5 or 43, and I'm actually going to agree with the pros on that game. So, yeah, I'm going to agree with the pros on that one. All right. The next game we have is going to be Virginia Tech versus Virginia. In that game, Virginia is favored to defeat Virginia Tech by 11.5 or 12. The over-under is 52.5 or 53, and I agree with the pros on that one. Virginia is better than Virginia Tech, despite the fact they replaced their coach. I don't think Virginia Tech is going to beat Virginia, not this year, maybe next year. The over-under is 52.5 or 53. So, again, Virginia defeats Virginia Tech by 12. I'll go over the 53. Next, you have Maryland versus Michigan State. And in that game, you have Michigan State favored to defeat Maryland by 3.5 or 4 points. The over-under is 47.5 or 48. And in that game, I'm going to actually agree Michigan State defeats Maryland by 4. I'm going over the 48. You have Rice versus South Florida. In that game, South Florida is favored to defeat Rice by 27.5 or 28 points. The over-under is 59.5 or 60. I agree that South Florida will win the game, but I disagree on the margin of victory. I have South Florida defeating Rice by 17. Hello. Sorry about that. Let's see, and I'm going to go over the 60. So South Florida defeats Rice by 17 and over. Next, you have Alabama versus Auburn. In that game, the pros favor Alabama to defeat Auburn by 5.5 or 6 points. The over-under is 48.5 or 49. Alabama has a lot going for it, stuff. They need to win this game in order to potentially get themselves in the Southeastern Conference Championship game and or the playoffs. So I'm going to go with the pros on this one. Alabama defeats Auburn by 6, and I'm going over the 49. Next, you have Northwestern versus Illinois. And in that game, Illinois is favored to defeat Northwestern by 7.5 or 8 points. The over-under is 47.5 or 48. And I am going to agree with the pros on that game. I believe Illinois will defeat Northwestern by 8, and I'm going over the 48. Next, you have Charlotte versus Tulane. In this game, Tulane is favored by the pros to defeat Charlotte by 29.5 or 30 points. The over-under is 52.5 or 53. I do think Tulane will defeat Charlotte, but I do not think it will be by 30 points. My thoughts are that Tulane will defeat Charlotte by 17 points, and I'm going over the 53. Next, you have North Carolina versus NC State. In that game, NC State is favored to defeat North Carolina by 7.5 or 8 points. The over-under is 48.5 or 49. In that game, North Carolina is not that great this year, so I think NC State will defeat North Carolina by 8, and I'm going over the 49. Next, you have SMU or Southern Methodist University versus California. In that game, SMU is favored to defeat California by 12.5 or 13 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. I think it'll, despite the fact that California just fired their head football coach and they've got a different person running things for the rest of the season, I still think both teams will play good defense and it will be relatively close. So I do agree that SMU will defeat California, but I do not think it'll be by 13, so I disagree with that. My final prediction is that SMU will defeat California by 7, and I'm going to go over the 52. Next, you have UNLV, or the University of Northern Las Vegas, versus Nevada. In that game, UNLV is favored to defeat Nevada by 9.5 or 10 points. The over-under is 52.5 or 53. And I'm going to agree with the pros on that one. I think UNLV is the better team, and they will defeat Nevada by 10 points, and I'm going over the 53. Next, you have Notre Dame versus Stanford. Notre Dame is playing lights out. They're playing like they've got something to prove, and they probably do. But anyway, the pros in that game favor Notre Dame to defeat Stanford by 32.5 or 33 points. The over-under is 51.5 or 52. And normally I wouldn't agree with the margin being that big, but I think Notre Dame has got more to prove, and I think they're going to play lights out, and they're going to play like there's no tomorrow. Excuse me. So with that, I'm actually going to agree with the pros on that one. Notre Dame defeats Stanford by 33 points, and I'm going to go over the 52. All right, next we have Fresno State versus San Jose State. Fresno State is favored by the pros to win that game by 2.5 or 3 points. The over-under is 46.5 or 47, and both of them being as close to each other as they are, I'm going to agree with the pros on that one, and I think Fresno State defeats San Diego. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think Fresno State defeats San Jose State. Not San Diego State. Sorry, I mispronounced that. By 3 points. The over-under is 46.5 or 47. I'm going to go over the 47. The last of the college football games that we will look at in this instance of things for the first part of this live stream is Wyoming versus Hawaii. In this game, Hawaii is favored to defeat Wyoming by 9.5 or 10 points. And the over-under is 44.5 or 45. I'm going to agree with the pros. I think Hawaii wins a few share of their games, and this one's going to be one they win. Hawaii's kind of one of those teams that either lose really, really bad or they win by a sizable margin, and there's no in between. So I think Hawaii will defeat Wyoming by 10, and I'm going over the 45. So we now have that done. I normally go over the Associated Press poll, but today I decided I'm not going to do that in this live stream. However, I will do a separate video that will go over who is in the AP poll top 25, and I'll go over that in a separate video today. But I'm not going to do that in this live stream. So The next order of business is now the NFL games. So in the NFL games, you've got one game you got several games that's going to be taking place on Thursday, and then you have a lot of them that's taking place on Sunday and or Monday. I'm just going to go over who is playing, not necessarily what day they're playing, but who is playing and what the odds are and what my thoughts are, and then we'll just go from that. So you have Atlanta playing the New York Jets, and in that game, Atlanta is favored to defeat the New York Jets by 1.5 or 2 points, and the over-under is 39.5 or 40. You have Arizona versus Tampa Bay. In that game, Tampa Bay is favored to defeat Arizona by 6.5 or 7, and the over-under is 49.5 or 50. You have Houston versus Indianapolis. In that game, you have Indianapolis favored to defeat Houston by 4.5 or 5. The over-under is 46.5 or 47. You have New Orleans versus the Dolphins, or New Orleans versus Miami, I'm sorry. And in that game, Miami is favored to defeat New Orleans by 4.5 or 5 points. The over-under is 42.5 or 43. Let's see. You have Los Angeles Rams versus the Carolina Panthers. And in that game, the Los Angeles Rams are favored to defeat Carolina by 9.5 or 10 points. The over-under is 45.5 or 46. You have San Francisco versus Cleveland. In that game, San Francisco is favored to win by 6.5 or 7 points, and the over-under is 42.5. You have Jacksonville versus Tennessee. In that game, Jacksonville is favored to defeat Tennessee by 7 points. The over-under is 41.5 or 42. You have Minnesota versus Seattle. In that game, Seattle is favored to defeat Minnesota by 7.5 or 8 points. The over-under is 43.5 or 44. You have Buffalo versus Pittsburgh. In that game, Buffalo is favored to defeat Pittsburgh by 4.5 or 5 points. The over-under is 47. The Raiders versus the Chargers. In that game, the Los Angeles Chargers versus Las Vegas. The Los Angeles Chargers are favored to defeat Las Vegas by 8.5 or 9 points. The over-under is 42.5 or 43. You have Denver versus Washington. And in that game, Denver is favored to defeat Washington by 6.5 or 7 points. The over-under is 43.5 or 44. You have the New York Giants versus New England. And in that game, New England is favored to defeat the New York Giants by 7.5 or 8 points. And the over-under is 46.5. In each of the games that I mentioned, with whatever the number is, I'm going to go over each of them. So, before I make my picks on let's just go with it. I'm going to have Atlanta win over the New York Jets, and I'm going over the 40. I'm going to have Tampa Bay defeat Arizona, and I'm going under the 50. I have Indianapolis defeating Houston, and I'm going to go over the 47. I have Miami defeating New Orleans, and I'm going over the 43. The Los Angeles Rams versus Carolina. I do agree Los Angeles Rams wins the game over Carolina, but I don't think it'll be by a 10-point margin. I think it'll be a 4-point margin, and I'm going to go with that. Plus, I'm going to go over the 46. San Francisco will be playing Cleveland. I agree San Francisco will win that game, and I'm going over the 43. You have Jacksonville versus Tennessee. In that game, I agree that Jacksonville wins the game, but I don't think it'll be by 7. I think it'll be by 3, and I'm going over the 42. You have Minnesota versus Seattle, and I'm going to go with Seattle winning that one. I'm going to go with the pros on that one, and I'm going over the 44. Buffalo versus Pittsburgh. I favor Buffalo to defeat Pittsburgh, and I'm going under the 47. You have you have the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm going to agree the Los Angeles Chargers defeats Las Vegas, although I disagree with the 9 point margin. I don't think it'll be 9 points. I think it'll be 3 points that Los Angeles beats Las Vegas, and I will go over the 43. I have Denver defeating Washington, and I agree with the pros on that one. I'm going to go over the 44. And in regard to the New York Giants versus the Patriots, I actually am going to completely disagree with that. I don't think the Patriots are that good this year. They have had their moments, but they're not that great this year. So because of that, I'm going to have the New York Giants win by 8, not the Patriots. And I'm going under the 47. So we've now gone over my college football picks and my NFL picks. We're going to move into another session where the special session that I was talking about. In college football, you have several divisions. You have regular NCAA Division One, FBS, or the football bowl system, and then you have FCS, which is one step below, which used to be called 1AA, and that is the football championship subdivision. So in FCS football, we have the playoffs fixing to start in Division One FCS, and I have the bracket. So we're going to go over the bracket, and I'm going to make my picks for who I think was going to win the game. This is that special thing that I was telling you about that's going to go on in this live stream. So first round games will take place November 29th. Second round will be December 6th. The quarterfinals will take place on either December 12th or 13th. The semifinals will take place December 20th. And the national championship for Division I FCS will take place January 5th at the First Bank Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. That national championship game will be broadcast on ESPN. So let's make picks now on who we think is going to win. Or I will make the picks. You have Illinois State versus Southeastern Louisiana, and I'm going to go Illinois on that one. I don't think they did this right, but that's okay. Next, you have Central Connecticut versus Rhode Island, and I'm going to go Rhode Island. You have Harvard versus Villanova, and I think I'm going to go Villanova. You have North Dakota versus Tennessee Tech, and I think it's going to be North Dakota. You have New Hampshire versus South Dakota State. I'm going to go South Dakota State. All right, you have Drake versus South Dakota. I'm going to go Drake. One thing to note, these teams that I'm mentioning are eligible in regular Division I sports in all sports except football. In the football, they have a separate division called FCS. So these teams you will see in regular Division I play in all other sports except football. So just want to make that noteworthy on that. And there's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. There's 24 teams that are in this FCS playoffs for the championship. Okay, next you have Lamar University versus Abilene Christian. I'm going to go Abilene Christian. All right, next you have Yale versus Youngstown State. I'm going to go Youngstown State. All right, now we have North Dakota State versus Illinois. And I'm going North Dakota State. They actually are really good. They usually get very far every year, and a lot of times they do win a championship. So next you have UC Davis versus Rhode Island, and I'm going to go UC Davis. You have Lehigh versus Villanova. We're going to go Lehigh. You have Tarleton State versus North Dakota. I'm going to go Tarleton State. You have Montana versus South Dakota State. I'm going to go South Dakota State. You have Mercer versus Drake. And I think I'm going to go Mercer. You have SFA versus Abilene Christian. We're going to go SFA. Next, you have Montana State versus Youngstown State. We're going to go Montana State. So, next you have North Dakota State or UC Davis. We're going to go North Dakota State. You have Lehigh versus Tarleton State. We're going to go Lehigh. You have South Dakota State versus Mercer. We're going to go South Dakota State. You have SFA versus Montana State. I'm going to go SFA. You have North Dakota State versus Lehigh. I'm going to go North Dakota State. And then you have South Dakota State versus SFA. And I'm going to go SFA. And then in the national championship game, you have North Dakota State versus SFA. So I'm going to go North Dakota State. So just a quick review. I have Illinois State defeating Southeastern Louisiana. I have Rhode Island beating Central Connecticut. I have Villanova defeating Harvard. I have North Dakota defeating Tennessee Tech. I have South Dakota State defeating Montana. Or South Dakota State defeating New Hampshire, sorry. Drake defeating South Dakota. Abilene Christian defeating SFA. Let's see. I'm sorry, Abilene Christian defeating Lamar University. And Youngstown State defeating Yale. Then I have Montana State defeating Youngstown State. I have SFA defeating Abilene Christian. I have Mercer defeating Drake. I have South Dakota State defeating Montana. I have Tarleton State defeating North Dakota. I have Lehigh defeating Villanova. I have UC Davis defeating Rhode Island. I have North Dakota State defeating Illinois. Then, let's see. You have North Dakota State versus Lehigh, and I have North Dakota State winning that one. You have South Dakota State defeating playing SFA. I have SFA, and then in the championship game, North Dakota State, I have North Dakota State winning it all. So anyway, with this college football picks, NFL picks, and going through that bracket, that is all that we're going to talk about today on this particular live stream. Next week will be the conference championships for Division One, and in that we will do more in-depth analysis on those games. We will also have the Season 1, Episode 4 of the live stream that's called Hoops and Pucks and Wednesdays, Oh My. That will take place on Wednesday of this week. After the college football conference championships, we will do a live stream regarding all games through the quarterfinals, bowl games, the playoff games, which include the quarterfinals, and we'll have the Army-Navy game, and we'll have some more in-depth analysis on that. We may have additional other live streams as appropriate with different things, different brackets. We might do more bracket stuff. We may actually have some live sports action, or we may have some other special things coming up, and I will announce that at the time. Sorry that this one was a little longer than usual, but, we'll just kind of go with it like that. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding college football in general, or NFL football in general? Well, if not, thank you for tuning into this live stream today. I do hope each and every one of you are doing well today. If you wish to subscribe to the channel, it is greatly appreciated. You can do so by going to www.youtube.com, the slash symbol, the at symbol, SPORTSLOV, or you can go on the YouTube search tab and type in Sportslov Media as two words, SPORTSLOV as the first word, media as the second word, MEDIA. You'll know it's me because I have Sportslov Media burned into a basketball as my avatar. I'm also on Twitter X. My handle there is at BobAmin16. That is the at symbol, BOBAMIN 16 for the Twitter X. So with that, thank you for tuning in to this broadcast today. If you will, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell so you can be made aware of when I'm doing these live streams, when I have sports action videos, when I have sports education videos, when I broadcast live, or when I have breaking news in the sports world. Thanks and have a wonderful day. Sportslov Media signing out. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.